Hello everyone, my name is Barry Finnegan. I'm a lecturer at the Faculty of Journalism and Media Communications in Griffith College, and I'm a member of the Irish branch of the European Civil Society group ATTAC, A-T-T-A-C, the Association for the Taxation of Financial Transactions for the Aid of Citizens. You'll find some of my writing about CETA and TTIP on our website, atttac.ie. I'm against CETA. I think everybody should be. The first reason is because of the ISDS, Investor State Dispute Settlement. The marketing people in the European Commission have renamed it the ICS, the Investor Court System. So in the 1,598 pages of CETA, the CETA, the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement, which is the EU-Canada Free Trade Agreement, nowhere is the words ICS, Investor Court System, appear. So it's a marketing message. The idea is that foreign companies will be allowed to take our governments to court in private. It's a special private arbitration mechanism. The opening and closing sessions are, of course, going to be available to the public, but either party can say that the rest of it is maintained in secret. The idea is that when a government law or regulation interferes with the private profits of a private company, that the people then repay the company for all future unearned profits that they haven't earned yet. What you'll find when you ask Fine Gael backbenchers is, what's your favourite 10 ISDS cases from around the world? 80% of the cases have taken place in the last 12 years. So you must have some of your favourite cases. Are there any Irish High Court judgments or German or French court cases that you think trampled over the rights of foreign investors? And specifically give us some examples where ISDS rode to the rescue of foreign capitalists and treated locals equally and with fairness. So ISDS is bonkers. The European Association of Judges, the German Association of Judges, not only are against it, but say there's no need for it and that it's against the EU law. So what is it that Fine Gael have a problem with asking the European Parliament to ask the European Court of Justice to find out is it legal under EU law? Anyway, the second reason I'm against CETA is because of the Regulatory Cooperation Committee. And the idea here is that whatever laws and regulations they can't get away with removing in the original 1,598 pages, that they set up a committee of experts, civil servants, from the Canadian Department of Trade and the EU Commission. They will then take submissions from stakeholders like the largest corporations in Europe and Canada, and then they will identify rules and regulations like, say, for example, injecting hormones into cows so that they grow faster for us to eat. And that they will identify regulations and laws that interfere in the private companies making private profit, and that they will then recommend that these regulations are removed. It will never see the light of day of a parliamentary body. These regulations will be swept aside at the touch of a bureaucrat's pen. The European Council of Ministers won't vote on it, the Irish Dáil won't vote on it, and the European Parliament won't vote on it. But you can see the wonderful efficiency when the emotional business of getting re-elected to a parliament is disconnected from removing health and safety regulations from the workplace, health and safety regulations from food, and how the politicians can say, it's not my fault, it wasn't me, it was the Regulatory Cooperation Council. But can you find Fine Gael TDs who can speak for more than 5 seconds about what that is? Have they spent hours reading about what they're about to plunge the European democracy into? No, because there hasn't been extensive, substantive, well-informed debate in the Fine Gael Commons across the country about what CETA is. But by God, I'll tell you, history will remember their names if this thing comes in. The next reason I'm against it is because the precautionary principle appears nowhere in the document. The precautionary principle is the European idea that if you have a new chemical or manufacturing process, you have to prove to the authorities that it doesn't kill or harm people, whereas in Canada and America, you do whatever you like with your chemicals, and the government needs to build up a body count as evidence to show that the chemical is nasty and then has to be banned. Nowhere in the 1,598 pages of CETA does the words precautionary principle appear. So it's very difficult to understand how the private, for-profit, paid by the day, non-tenured, temporary arbitrators who will act as judges are going to be able to use the precautionary principle to defend European rights. The next one then is the ratchet clause. Government monopolies are to be phased out. It's going to be made illegal under international law to re-nationalise public services that have been privatised. The next reason then, of course, is the reservations. Ireland could have put down Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Labour and the Greens, who have all been in power during the negotiations of CETA, could have improved our list of reservations. Ireland has excluded 7 things from the CETA, so deregulation, privatisation and the ISDS won't apply to veterinary. There'll be no competition in veterinary services. Of course, the Honourable Society of the King's Inns and the Law Society are protected, so no free trade there. They could have protected water, education, health or undertaker services, as some countries across Europe did, but no. So there will be no mechanism through which the Irish state can impose regulations to do with quality in the water, in education, in health, and as we know from European Court of Justice rulings, anything that a fee is paid for is subject to the free market. So that obviously includes all our hospitals as well. But it would be nice if Fianna Fáil could make up for lost time and educate themselves about what the ratchet clause is and what the precautionary principle is, seen as they were partly responsible for getting us into this mess. Workers' rights out the window. Who's to say that a certain level of workers' rights, the workers' rights mechanisms in Europe aren't included in the ISDS chapter. So 20 days a year holiday seems like an unnecessarily restrictive and overly burdensome barrier to trade at the whim of 2 out of 3 arbitrators. That can be swept aside. And so when the Commission and Fine Gael tell you, don't worry, ISDS is now called ICS, and they're proper judges. No, they're not proper judges. If you actually read the document that's available on the European Commission website, there's nothing about these people being judges. There will be a panel. They'll be paid $4,000 a year for being on the panel that the arbitrators could be selected from, and they'll be paid €3,000 a day while they're acting as arbitrators at the ISDS panel arbitration mechanism when the companies are suing the governments. So obviously it's in their interest to make the case last longer. It's in their interest to let corporations win. The more corporations that win, the more cases that will be taken, and the more they can earn $3,000 a day. So it completely usurps and overturns on its head the entire notion of justice being seen to be done and the impartiality of the judges, of course. So again, in July 2015, the European Parliament voted to have a version of ISDS. And if you compare the version of ISDS that they voted in favour of, it is wildly different to the ICS in the CETA document, which is, of course, absolutely preposterous. Climate change, forget about it. We'll never be able to introduce legislation to force private companies to behave in a certain way. This kind of communist style big government telling private companies what to do will be illegal under CETA. That's the entire purpose of it. So telling companies to reduce their emissions, fining companies for burning particular fossil fuels will be utterly impossible, because nowhere in the ISDS sections of the CETA does it tell you. And the last couple of things then are the jobs and growth. Ha ha ha. There are no jobs in CETA. The way that they calculate the impact on the European economy of CETA after it's been implemented is a CGE. It's a thing called computable general equilibrium, CGE, and it's an obscure mechanism for economists to share with economists their fantasies about what might happen when a trade agreement comes into place. So it starts off like this. They assume 100% employment. They assume 0% employment, 0% unemployment. So everybody has a job. The entire society is at maximum capacity in terms of productivity. So they calculate that when an Irish beef farmer loses his job, an Irish chicken farmer, due to gargantuan factories with tens of thousands of animals undercutting their prices here in Ireland as cheap muck food floods in to Ireland from Canadian factory farms, that the Irish beef farmer, chicken farmer will be able to move to the fashion industry in Milan overnight, or be able to move to the car industry in Dusseldorf overnight with zero labour market moving costs, no language prohibition, and no training required. Because this computable general equilibrium was designed by economists, for economists, and never to be used for public policy making. And so when you ask them for as well proof that there's economic growth, the only document that they can rely on is the 2009 Canadian Government and EU Commission report, where they show that over a 7-year period there will be 0.08% economic growth. If you divide that by 7 years, which it's representing, that's 0.01%. That's 1 over 100. So the reason that they don't tell you the percentage of economic growth that's going to come from CETA is because it's 1/100th of 1%, 0.01%. So in the interest of democracy, it'd be nice to think that somebody somewhere in Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil could talk about these issues. It'd be nice to hear Fianna Fáil saying that they will that they will vote against CETA in the Dáil when it comes up, and it would be nice to think that the Fine Gael MEPs could muster up the courage to go out into public and to discuss why they're in favour of CETA in public, and perhaps even debate against me. Viva la democracia, death to CETA and ISDS, and may European democracy live long. Thank you and goodbye.